Hey, we love to answer your questions that you send in, and today we're going to answer a question about sexual intimacy. I'm Mitch,
And I'm Kim at Keeping the Vows
where we're all about helping people to discover
and maintain a Christ-like marriage.
We're getting good at that, you know.
Pretty good, pretty
Okay.
good.
Want to read us the question?
Sure. As a guy, I felt defeated sexually at times. I wanted more intimacy and sex. Hinting rarely worked, and even when I would do extra things around the house to lighten the load, it still wasn't enough. What would you recommend for healthy patterns and communication when it comes to wanting sexual intimacy? You know, God created us as sexual beings. It's part of His plan, but because of our sin nature, this can definitely be an area in our marriage where we don't get along. I think sometimes we listen to the world or popular culture, and somehow we get the mistaken notion that because we've fallen in love with one another, that everything's just going to flow together naturally. And that's just not true at all. We've said in another video that God wants to use our marriage to make us more like Him. And I think this is probably one of the areas where maybe we have to work the hardest to understand one another because we are wired so very differently. So God wants to use this area of your marriage to make Him more like Him. And in the end, it'll help you to have the one flesh marriage that He wants you to have if you put in that effort.
Hey, I want you to know that if your sex drive is at different levels, you're not alone. As a matter of fact, you're probably more alone if your sex drives match. This is virtually everyone is like this. We're just totally different people. It's rare that people's sex drives align. I once heard a guy at a marriage seminar talking, and he was talking about how there's a difference in sex drives. And he said most generally the man has the higher sex drive. And he said, in fact, men out there, if any of you have a wife with a higher sex drive than you, don't raise your hand because the rest of us guys would probably beat you up right now. So I don't know if that's really funny or not. I thought it was a little bit amusing. But it's generally like that. It's not uncommon, though, at about age 40 that shifts. And that while the man is normally the aggressor before, that the woman actually might become more of the aggressor afterwards. And that's a nice change to go through, too. So there's a difference in your marriage, just a difference and a change there. The way you grew up thinking about sex matters. If you grew up and you were taught that it was dirty, that it was a sin, that it was unclean, that I know a gal, her mom's taught her all that men want is one thing, sex, you know. And I wonder how she grew up. As opposed to that, if you're, you know, I grew up in a family of four. I was the youngest. We grew up on a farm, and so I was taught that, you know, it was natural. We'd see the animals, you know, and I just grew up with it and learned that it was natural, and so my views were different than others. I know there was a young gal that came to us in premarital counseling, and she said that her dad was not around and her anymore, and her mom was too afraid to talk to her about sex. So her mom asked her dad, which would be the girl's grandpa, to explain sex to her. And the girl said, worst 15 minutes of my life was my grandpa trying to tell me about sex. So I could understand that. So the attitudes you grew up with about sex are really going to make a difference. Where does all this lead us? You know, men and women are really different. I say it like this. The woman needs a reason to have sex. Her body is very precious to her. Guys, listen to this. Your wife's body is very precious. And for her to yield that to you, everything has to be lined up right. She has to know that she's loved. She has to know she's respected. She has to know she's cared for. She has to know that she's the apple of your eye. And she needs to know all those things. She needs to be made to feel of value. If you're making fun of her body all week and then you want to have sex with her, that's not going to work. So a woman needs a reason to have sex. But men are visual. The men just need a place to have sex and barely a place, as a matter of fact. I say men could live in a cave, and it wouldn't have to be a nice cave if it had a big enough TV. And I was talking to a friend of mine last week, and he said, I would need heat also. So, you know, men are we're just like that. And so your expectations are just different in sex. If you're a man or a woman, totally different.
Yeah.
You know, and women say, well, that's not realistic, that men can't go for more than 20 minutes without thinking about sex. You're right. It's not realistic, but it doesn't make it any less true. Okay, men are just more that way, and that's just how we think.
So, how did you feel when we first got married? You've already said it in another video.
When I got my expectations,
Yeah.
well, I was good. I was getting married, and I thought, okay, my expectations is I'm going to have sex every day for 2 years. I mean, I was 24 years old.
There
That's
you
just
go.
that's just what I thought. You know what? It didn't work out like that. But
I didn't learn this expectation till many, many years later.
I was a caveman. It was all about me. It wasn't at all about her. But I wasn't even going to mention that. That's neat.
Maybe if I would have known that was your expectation earlier in marriage, maybe I have no idea. Maybe we would have worked through things earlier. I don't know. Our expectations were way different.
And maybe you never would have married me. I don't know.
It never crossed my mind to set a goal.
To have sex?
A goal, no,
For 2 years,
of
you mean,
how
or-
many times we were going to have sex in the first 2 years.
I know.
of marriage.
I'm a type A person. Also, if either one of you have ever been sexually molested or someone's been raped or abused in that way, you need to go and you need to get professional help. The reason is, like, we had a gal that came to me for counseling. She was married, and from the time she was like 11 to 14, her brother had molested her. And so she didn't like sex, didn't want to have sex. And so her husband was actually paying for what her brother had done to her for those early years. And you know what? She was paying for it too. And normally when somebody comes to me like that, they feel like it's partially their fault. And one of the things that like I had to talk to her about and help her understand was it wasn't her fault that her older brother sexually molested her. That wasn't her fault. And so I helped her work through it. I have a three-part thing I do for forgiveness. I helped her work through that and understand that that she could forgive her brother and that she could move on with her life. And it actually helped both of them. Both of them came to me later and said that they really thanked me for helping them out of that in their marriage. Once again, her husband was going to pay for what her brother did to her for the rest of their marriage, and that just wouldn't have been fair. Men and women see sex as something totally different. They just think differently about this. So, women, I'm going to tell you something about guys. We think about sex a lot more than you think that we do. Dr. Phil and Steve Harvey were both on like a newlywed game, a remake of it. They were married. And they asked Dr. Phil's wife how she knew when he wanted sex. And she said, when he's awake. They asked Steve Harvey's wife how she knew when he wanted sex. And she said, he always wants sex. Okay? So women don't understand, but men think about this a lot more than you think. There was a college professor who told his students he wanted them to journal every few minutes just what they were thinking about at any given time. And what he learned from that, they turned in the papers, and what he learned about that was that consistently, after about 20 minutes, all the guys were thinking about sex for the rest of the class. Now you say, well, that's really shallow. I can't believe that's true. Well, yeah, it's totally shallow, but it's probably true. So what the professor did is he adjusted. He would lecture the first 20 minutes, and he knew he lost the guys anyway. So then he would do like a lab or a discussion or do some other thing to keep their minds occupied because he lost all the guys after 20 minutes anyway. So there was no point in keeping up with.
Yeah.
And women say, well, that's not realistic that men can't go for more than 20 minutes without thinking about sex. You're right. It's not realistic, but it doesn't make it any less true. Okay, men are just more that way, and that's just how we think.
So, how did you feel when we first got married? You've already said it in another video.
When I got my expectations,
Yeah.
well, I was good. I was getting married, and I thought, okay, my expectations is I'm going to have sex every day for 2 years. I mean, I was 24 years old.
There
That's
you
just
go.
that's just what I thought. You know what? It didn't work out like that. But
I didn't learn this expectation till many, many years later.
I was a caveman. It was all about me. It wasn't at all about her. I didn't think anything about her. I just wanted myself fulfilled. And that's how I went into marriage. And I was totally wrong. I was totally selfish. But those are the expectations that people have. But I wasn't even going to mention that. That's neat.
Maybe if I would have known that was your expectation earlier in marriage, maybe I have no idea. Maybe we would have worked through things earlier. I don't know. Our expectations were way different.
And maybe you never would have married me. I don't know.
It never crossed my mind to set a goal.
To have sex?
A goal, no,
For 2 years, you
of
mean,
how
or-
many times we were going to have sex in the first 2 years.
I know.
of marriage.
I'm a type A person. Why
Word.
don't you tell us something about? I've told women something about men.
Okay. Men. So the key to sexual intimacy for a woman is to feel valued as a person.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like it would just make sense. All of us want to be valued for who we are. She just doesn't want to feel like her body is the only thing that's important to you. And a good place to start with this is communication, and not just how are you, but actually finding out what's important to her and who she is. Mitch and I like to watch chick flicks, and one of the movies we watch from time to time is How to Fall in Love. There's a geeky accountant who ends up taking dating lessons from his high school crush, and one of the lessons she teaches him is that when you're out with a girl, pay attention, listen to what she's saying, repeat it back, and that's golden. And he's taking notes like this is something he never thought of before.
He probably hadn't.
So, pay attention to your wife, listen to what she has to say, try to get her to know who she really is inside, and that will help open her up to you.
Yeah. So where does all this lead us? Well, if a woman's going to respond to her husband, it's going to be because they've had a joining of the souls. And I know, guys, this means you're going to have to talk. That means you're going to have to do that. But you know what? That's what marriage is all about. Marriage isn't about living with somebody and just getting sex when you want it. Marriage is about getting to know the person. There's all the jokes out there about trying to understand women and things like that. And Kim and I are totally different, but I actually believe I understand her.
Mm-hmm. He's worked hard at that, yeah.
Yeah, but I enjoy it. And just like, I'm a woodworker and I'm not that great, but I build like these rocking chairs. And
He's great.
Say, guy needs to think he's needed. But so I went after woodworking to learn it, okay? Counseling, marriage, I went after those things to learn it. So why don't I go after Kim to learn her? Not just go after her sexually, but go after her to learn her and get to know her. And when I do that, I give her value. And I think for a woman, like I said, a woman's body is very precious to her. To give up her body, to yield it to a man, I mean, she has to feel valued. She has to feel loved and respected. It just only makes sense that's how it would work. So men and women are so different. Let me give you an illustration. The men are visually stimulated. The women need to have I told you, they have to have a reason to have sex. A man needs to have a place and barely a place, right? So to show you how this works, a husband and wife can have an argument in the morning, and they can go to work and they're not speaking, and they come home that night, they're still not speaking, they're around the house, and they're getting ready for bed, and he sees her at some stage of undress. Well, because the man is visual, he's stimulated and he's ready to have sex. But because she is relational, she is not ready to have sex. And if she does yield and has sex with him, then she feels just like a prostitute. And I have preached that at a church, and I saw in a couple of churches, I saw a sea of women's heads go like this. I had women walk up to me afterwards and just squeeze my hand and walk away because they wanted their husband to know they didn't like feeling like that. And I'll tell you what, I don't want my wife to feel like that. I want to treat my wife so that when we're intimate, that she wants to give me her body. I don't want to if she doesn't want to. I know that's a strange concept for some of you guys. When I first got married, I could care less if she wanted to, probably. But now I'm a totally different person.
So here are some suggestions for you. The first thing I want to do is read from 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 5. And that tells us, "Now for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Mm-hmm. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." So this passage of scripture gives us two suggestions. The first one is that your body is not your own. This is something that Mitch and I agree on. My body belongs to him and his body belongs to me. This isn't something that we understood at all when we were first married or something that we were willing to submit to, but this is what God's word says, and you're always going to benefit when you obey the teachings that you find in the Bible. So I'm here to fulfill Mitch, and he's here to fulfill me.
This is something too that, in a lot of our talks we talk about knowing God, because if you can't submit to God, you probably can't submit to your spouse either.
Yeah.
And so it's so imperative. And we didn't, like Kim said, we didn't start out like this, but now we're like this. Now we're totally like this. I care more about her satisfaction than I ever do mine, because that's just how I'm wired, and she feels that way about me. And it used to be I was all about my satisfaction. I didn't care about her, and it's totally opposite. So
Yeah.
yep.
And the second lesson we can learn from this passage is don't withhold sex. Withholding sex to punish your spouse is not the way to go. If you do that, you're just going to hurt the relationship, because you're going to frustrate your spouse not only sexually but relationally as well. And so if you're a person who does this, this is something that you need to overcome. And if you can't overcome it on yourself, then maybe you need to go see a good Christian counselor.
And Paul even says, do this only for a short time so that you don't become tempted.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, if I don't let my husband have sex, he's better not go out and have sex with someone else. Well, don't get me wrong. He's still wrong if he goes out and has sex with someone else. But you don't want to drive him out to someone else. Not that it would be right, but you want to take care of your own household. And it's my job to satisfy my wife, and it's her job to satisfy me. And it's just how we understand it.
Yeah. If you're your husband's only option and you withhold from him, then yeah, where does that leave him? That's not going to work out.
Yeah.
The first suggestion was not your body is not your own, and don't withhold sex. And the second suggestion is to fill your spouse's love tank. We have a whole nother video and blog about the 5 love languages. So if you look down below, we'll have links for the book, the test, the article. Check that out, because if you keep your spouse's love tank full, that's definitely going to contribute to your intimacy.
The third suggestion: stressed, got sex. I was in college, and I went when I was 31, and I was afraid I was brain dead, because I hadn't written a letter for 8 years, and I didn't know. I'd forgotten what I knew about English and everything, and I was just left a great job with what I was doing, and I thought, what if I can't do this? What if I'm brain dead? And I was all afraid. And so one day I go to a chiropractor during my freshman year, and the chiropractor has me lay down on the table, and they claim they can feel with their hands. They felt down my back and everything, and he said, sit up. And I sat up, and he goes, your back isn't out. You're just tense. Your muscles are tight. What's going on in your life? And I said, well, it's finals week, and it's my first semester, and this and this. And he said, so you're just stressed. And I go, yeah. And he goes, the best stress reliever that God ever made? And I said, no. And he goes, sex. I'm like, what? And he said, no. He said, because of the chemicals that get released after orgasm and everything, that's the best stress relief that there is. And I said, well, could you write my wife a prescription? Because she isn't going to believe this, But anyway, I went home and talked and laughed with Kim about it. But I had a college professor that was really, really smart guy. And his name was Joe. And I went into his office. And even though he's my college professor, I was 31. So I could just talk to him like a friend, We became friends. And I told him this about how that, sex was a stress reliever. And he sat there, and he threw down his pencil at his desk, and he looked at me, and he says, I just spent this weekend teaching a seminar on stress. And I never thought about this. This is so true. I'm going to start including this in my talks from now on. And I thought, wow, that was interesting. So if you get stressed, the best stress relief is sex, is orgasm. And so it becomes a joke. Wow, honey, I really feel stressed. It just becomes a joke with us, okay? The fourth thing that, this is something we don't do, but we've had, we've counseled a lot of couples. But we know of a couple, and she's a little bit OCD, which is fine. And so they had a talk, and they decided how many times a month they thought they should have sex. And she keeps a calendar and makes sure they get that number in. And I don't know if it gets to the end and they haven't done it, if she about kills him or what. But anyway, way to go, I guess. But we don't do that. But if it's the way that you can do it to make it happen, then that's great. So whatever.
I have to interject. So it's back on the prescription for sex thing. Not the chiropractor, but we had a doctor friend who had a good sense of humor. He actually wrote Mitch a prescription for sex, although Mitch never turned it in, like used it that way, but it was
Yeah.
kind of funny.
Yeah. And what was the thing he listed on it? Not generic, but
Yeah. Yeah, had to be dispensed as written. Couldn't be generic.
it couldn't be generic.
No
No
substitutes.
is what he did. But well, it was after I'd had my vasectomy, and he said you
Yeah.
have to do that. And I said, can I have a prescription? He goes, sure. I write them all the time. And he wrote a prescription. I took it home and showed Kim, and Kim's like, oh my gosh, because she was just embarrassed that anybody would even think of that. But being a guy, yeah, we think about that.
Suggestion number 5: busyness, the ultimate sex killer.
Yeah.
We all tend to live busy lifestyles. I think we did a video on that.
I think we did. Little
But
house on the freeway.
when you keep busy all the time, it just takes a toll on every area of your life.
Yeah.
If you're busy, you're going to be worn out, and so then you're not going to have the energy to be there for your spouse and actually for yourself, to enjoy that part of your marriage. Some people seem to think that busyness is a badge of honor, but actually it just shows that you're not managing your time well. So look at your schedule. Don't be over busy. Keep it under control so that you can enjoy this part of your life.
I have a book that I liked. It's called 168. That's the number of hours in a week. And one of the things they do is they have you go through and chart your time every 15 minutes for a couple weeks. And so every couple years I do that. And it's always revealing. Either it shows me things I don't know, or it really enforces things I do know, and I have to make, like I'm doing too much, I have to give up this, and this, or delegate this, or this. So that has been good. And we're working now to get, if you go to our webpage at keepingthevows.com and go to resources, we're working now to get a, hopefully in the next week or so it'll be up, where it's going to be the timesheet that you can just do that. We all have a certain amount of money, and if we don't manage it well, we don't have money, right? Well, we all have 168 hours in a week, and if we don't manage it well, we won't have time either. We knew a couple that we asked them years ago if they wanted to go and do something. They said, well, we got 3 kids. We're booked every single night for the next 30 days. Yeah, the next 30 days they were booked. And I thought, man, I don't want to live a hurried lifestyle like that. But busyness can really interrupt your sex. Hey, Nike has a slogan, and you know what it is?
Just do it.
Just do it. We were reading an article by a lady, and she said that her and her husband talked about it. And when one person's in the mood and the other one's not in the mood, they've adapted the Nike philosophy of just do it. And their reasoning for this was, she said, every time that we do it, there's a level of satisfaction. It's just getting started, So they just decided, let's just do it. And so we decided to try that, and we really think it's smart. It's really smart, because if one person wants to, you don't want to deprive that person, and then the other person, there will be some level of enjoyment anyway, and afterwards you're always glad that you did, because you want to satisfy your spouse. So thanks, Nike.
Point number 7: sex begins in the kitchen. This is the interesting title of a book written by Kevin Lehman.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine my husband
It's
will
Lehman or Lehman. I think it might be Lehman.
I think it's Lehman.
I think it's Lehman.
My husband will put a link down at the bottom to the book. But
I
it talks about the fact that there's more to sex than just turning the lights off at night. And one of the examples talked about, if we're together in the kitchen in the morning and we brush up against each other, then one of us might say, tonight's the night. My husband says, everybody needs a look that tonight's the night. And then throughout the day, maybe we'll text each other and you say something that just looks regular to everybody else, but
can't wait to see you tonight.
And so that helps to build the anticipation throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so, talk about it in the morning and anticipate it throughout the day, which will just increase your pleasure when you come together that evening.
I think it's great. I think that's so smart. That's so smart.
And another suggestion that was in the book was just spending time together in companionship. And the example he gave was when he and his wife were dating, that they would go fishing together. And she loved to go fishing. Well, then after they got married, when they went fishing, she'd just lay in the boat. He said he realized that when they were dating, he was actually the fish. She was actually there for him, not to go fishing. But, this is something Mitch and I do. Mitch loves to woodwork, and he loves for me to be with him. So what he really loves is me going out there on my own initiative. And if I come out there and he's in the middle of something, he'll stop what he's doing and get out my lawn chair that lays back and get it all set up for me, and I'll be there reading a book or on my computer or whatever. And sometimes he'll have me help him a little bit, but he just likes the fact that we're together. And I guess that would be, I'm showing you value too, because I want to spend time with you.
Yeah, but then another thing too that happens that I really like is Kim's really smart. I get a lot done in life because I'm really intuitive and I really am driven, but Kim's actually a lot smarter than me. She is smarter than me.
Not true.
Nod yes.
Not true.
But one of the things that'll happen is she'll be out there and I say, hey, hon, could you come here a second? I'll say, I can't figure out how to do this. And she'll say, what if you did this? And I'm like, great idea. And so when I can do that, not only does it help me, but it adds value to her life. It fills her love tank. She goes back over and sits down, gets on her computer, and she's reading a book or doing our finances or whatever she's doing over there. But then she actually contributed to that. And all of this contributes to your intimacy. Mm-hmm. Which is all tied together. It's all tied together. Yeah. Intimacy and all of this. So when we get groceries, I just like to go with her. And I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Okay, I got to have
Should
a minute.
I say it?
I don't care.
I don't like the winter because she wears a long coat. In the summertime, she doesn't, and I can watch her go down the aisle. I follow her anyway. I'm like Pavlov's dog. I'll just follow her anyway. It's been 37 years. It doesn't matter. That'll be an outtake, you think?
Probably.
Okay.
The next suggestion is just to work on it and give it time. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time to develop that kind of relationship and that kind of bond. Mitch read a book that said sex is better after 30 years of marriage.
Yeah.
We both agree with this. We both think this is true. And I think one of the reasons is because, look at all the shared experiences the two of you have. And if you've invested into your relationship, then all you've learned about one another and went through together. So it's just a culmination, for us of 37 years. So how could it not help but be better when you put all that together?
Yeah. Yeah, and something's helped me too over time. This wasn't in our notes. Shocker, I'm going to do something that's not in our notes. But 7 years ago, I had prostate cancer, and I'm okay now. But I went ahead and had the prostate removed, and one of the side effects could be that I couldn't perform sexually. Well, fortunately, I can. But before that surgery, I had to go, cancer, sex. I had to weigh it out. Well, at my age, I was 57, 55, and we talked it over and said, well, if we couldn't anymore, we would still have a great marriage, but it would really be a big adjustment. Well, the fact is that, we can, but now it makes us appreciate it so much more. Mm-hmm. So, over time, things change too.
Yeah.
And I told her we first got married and we were 24, and if they said sex, death, I'd have to go, well, that's a tough one. Let me sleep on it. I don't know what, At 55, it wasn't quite as hard, but anyway. It's called maturity, I think.
Yep.
That might be another outtake. I'm not sure. My turn?
Yep.
Hey, another point too is that see sex as worship. Anything that we do in reverence to God is called worship. I was in a class called worship, and they said that anything you do in reverence to God is called worship. And if sex was not invented in a dark alley behind a bar, God created it, and it's absolutely beautiful between a husband and a wife. It's His plan, and He gave it to us for procreation, but He also gave it to us for enjoyment, for pleasure, for fun. God is a good God, and He gave us that. And so, therefore, anything you do in reverence to God is called worship. Well, if God gave it to us, my professor said, why not sometimes before you partake of this pleasure that God gave you, you just pray out loud and thank God for this gift. I know you're thinking, I don't want God to know I'm having sex. Well, I'm here to tell you He knows anyway, okay? So sometimes before we partake, I just say, God, thank you so much for this gift. We just invite you into our relationship in every facet. Thank you for this. We love each other so much. Thank you for this, and we love you. Amen. You hurry through the prayer if you're a guy, probably. Just teasing. That's the first time I ever said that. That's kind of funny, wasn't it?
Funny.
Anyway, but that's just something to think about. Is thank God for it, and you know what? It has to be pleasing to God that you thank Him for that. You know, even that we don't think about that. We just take that for granted.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be taken for granted. Okay. And so anyway, a funny thing happened. I'm going to show you a picture here. We were in Shipshewana, Indiana, and we were at this Amish Mennonite furniture store, and there was a lady up at the desk, and she had a covering on, you know, a Mennonite lady or Amish something, and they had this bed, and above it there was a cursive written. I'll show you the picture there. It said "worship" right above the bed. I looked at Kim and go, "Look at that." And I said, if I'd have walked up and told that conservative Mennonite lady what I learned about worship, she'd have gotten red-faced and tore the thing down right away, I'm sure. But it was funny. And so we actually have this picture printed out, and we show it to all of our premarital couples, you know, about don't think of sex as dirty. Think of it as something that you know, you can give God thanks for. And that adds a whole new dimension to it when you realize it's from God and it's designed by Him for us, for our pleasure. That changes everything. In summary, I'd like to say that I think every woman wants to be there for her husband sexually. And so it's just a lot of different variables to get everything. It's like a combination. You got to get everything lined up so that it works, you know, so that it works for both of you. That both of you want to submit to the other person at the same time. You need to remember that intimacy is not just about your sex life, but it's an overall snapshot of your entire love life. And it's not just the alignment of your bodies. It's a snapshot of what your love life is like. And so if your sex life isn't good, you better look at your love life, because maybe there's things there that just aren't aligned. We strongly recommend the book Sheet Music. As a matter of fact, I keep it right here. And I'm going to put a link to this book. If you think sheet music is like an orchestra or something like that, you know, sheet music, it's about bed sheets. And it's a Christian book, and it's by Kevin Lehman, and Dr. Kevin Lehman. And I'll tell you what, it's the best book I've ever read on that. We talk to people about appropriate sex materials or not, you know what, and this even has, you can read like 3 or 4 chapters, and then it says, okay, if you're not married, stop here before you get into all the other intricate things. And we actually knew a couple that got married, and we done their premarital counseling, and I asked them like a couple months later if they read the book, and she said, oh yeah, after they got married, the next day they were driving to their honeymoon destination, and she was in the truck reading it out loud to her new husband. I thought that was hilarious. That is a great picture because they're fun people, but I thought that was good. It teaches you so much and so many things. We knew of a couple, and she said if she never had sex again, it wouldn't bother her. And she read this book, and it helped her understand her man. Guy, if you think that your wife is frigid, you don't understand women. And woman, if you think all that your husband ever wants is sex, then you don't understand men. And this book will help to bring that together so that the two of you understand. We'll put a link to it. If you do click on it, it'll take you to Amazon. You can buy it there. It won't cost you a penny more, but we'll get a small commission. It's called affiliate sales. We want you to know that, but you'll be supporting our ministry. So the book is very, very detailed. And so when we do premarital counseling, we probably spend 35, 40 minutes talking to people about sex. And this book will tell them a lot more than I have time for that, and probably more than what I want to. I mean, there's a whole chapter in here on oral sex. And so I don't address that when we talk to people in premarital counseling, but this book addresses everything that I can think of, and highly, highly, highly recommend it to you. Highly recommend that you read it together and that you talk it and you discuss it and go from there. We're going to leave you some links. We're going to have a whole bunch of them down there for you. And I'm probably going to put them on the web page at the bottom of this. So also you're seeing this either on Facebook or you're seeing it on YouTube. And if you want to, go to keepingthevows.com. You can get the same thing there in writing. Sometimes people say, can I get this in writing? And yeah, you can. Just go to our blog at keepingthevows.com. And every week we try to get out 3 topics, and we get out a blog and a video on each one of those things. So I'd love to have you check those out. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, stay tuned in because there's probably going to be some outtakes on the end of this.
Uh-oh.
Kim won't like them, but they're hilarious. Well, she doesn't care. She pretends like she doesn't. So thanks so much for tuning in. It's just so great to be a part of your lives. Thanks for the letters and the emails and the things that we're getting, the people whose lives we're impacting. This is what we're all about. You might not know it, but what we're doing is an absolute tremendous amount of work to get a web page up and going, the blog, the YouTube, the Facebook, So learning the lighting, learning the audio, the video, the editing, everything we do is a tremendous amount of work. But we absolutely love it because we love pouring into people and helping other people in their relationships. So God bless and have a wonderful day. Hello, today we're going to be talking about answering. I know. I'll get you loosened up.
Thank you. I need that.
Yeah.